a protocol that enables the creation of these sort of super commodities, right? It doesn't just have to be intelligence. It can be anything. I don't like elitism. I don't like aristocracy. I like things becoming cheaper. Let's make things cheaper. It's very good for TAO holders. I think it's good for subnet owners and subnet builders. Probably the better word to use there. It's better for subnet builders who want to actually build commodities and drive prices to zero. I don't think it's good for extractors. I don't think it's good for exploiters.
Planning out for the future, even way back then, how can we make this where it is as easy as possible to bring people on and bring organics on like this? And the most obvious way was, how can I make this ChatGPT compliant? How can I make this OpenAI compliant? And we achieved that. Now, all these other people that are currently using some sort of OpenAI compliant endpoint, you can send a request. If you can send it to OpenAI, if you can send it to ChatGPT, you can send it to us.
Welcome to the Ventura Labs podcast, where we dive into the world of Bittensor and explore the latest developments and innovations. Today, we're joined by Robert Myers and the team at Manifold Labs, pioneers in the Bittensor ecosystem. We'll be discussing their journey in developing Targon, the challenges they've faced, and their vision for the future. We'll also explore their innovative solutions they've developed, including a deterministic approach to trustless model verification. And now, to Robert and the Manifold team with the 6th Ventura Labs podcast.
Now we're rolling.
We're rolling. All right. Here we go.
Josh, Robert, and Discord ID.
Sarokhan.
Yeah.
What an intro.
Yeah.
This is the Manifold team.
Manifold boys.
Yeah.
It's great to be here. Thank you for coming into the office today. This is really exciting. First in-person podcast.
That's right.
Let's go. Yeah.
6 Halloween special.
Halloween. Happy Halloween, by the way. I guess Jim Bro number 1, Jim Bro number 2, and Gunslinger. Papa. Halloween's my favorite holiday. People like Thanksgiving because you get the family. I like it. The stuffing, the food, it's nice, right? Doesn't do it for me, right? But I like it. Christmas, people get things. It's cool. Maybe it snows, not here, but snows in some parts of the world, right? That's why maybe people like Christmas. If you're in Colorado, maybe Christmas, the atmosphere, the vibe is nice, right? But down here in the heart of Texas, Halloween is the greatest holiday we can have. All right, the leaves are changing. The weather's nicer, It's not 115 degrees. It's like a nice 80, So, listen, it's great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Decided to do this in person. So, you've obviously been involved with Bittensor. You were the 3rd person involved with Bittensor, the 4th hire of OpenTensor.
Yeah.
And these guys work with you now. So if you guys could just talk about what you're doing here at Manifold, what are your roles with the team, a little background for how you guys met.
Yeah, sure. I'm Josh. I'm our CTO here at Manifold. I've been working on the subnet for a little bit now. It's been an absolute blast. Manifold actually found me on Discord. They randomly reached out on a Discord server. I happened to be here in Austin and met in person, and rest is history.
Yeah. I'll never forget, we went at our old office. You remember our old office, right? There's that coffee shop right up the hill. And I said, oh, hey, let's meet up there, right? We went into the coffee shop. He was there. I said, actually, let's just go back to the office, right? We ended up hanging out all day, right? And we were like, hey, man, you want to work with us? And he was like, yeah, sure, no problem. That sounds great to me. And so, And then Josh knew Ahmed. Sarokhan. Excuse me.
We
Dotson. Yeah.
Yo,
we need to cut that out. Get that out of there. Yeah. But and so we needed more hands and more help. And if you want to, I'll bounce past to you.
No, I started in April this year, I think, and I had met Josh through some college work that we had done. He actually interviewed me at the gym lifting, and then he told me about this great opportunity here with Rob and Alex and all them, and I came down in April. It's been a blast since.
Yeah. No, it's been great, man, for real.
There you go. I mean, you got this beautiful office, a little bit bigger than your last one.
Yeah, a little bit
Just
bigger.
a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of these rooms that we have is now the size of our old office, and we had a horrible ventilation problem. I mean, we would be sitting in there, and it would get 1,500 ppm CO2, which is enough to put you to sleep. I mean, it was bad. And now, I mean, we have the CO2 monitor. We're at 500 all day. I mean, that's good for thinking. It's good for clarity, coding, right? You're not feeling like at like 2 o'clock, you're like, oh my God, I'm about to pass out, So, yeah, it's really nice to be in here. This is a collaboration between the University of Texas, Akash, and Manifold. But, while we've been started here for the past few weeks, we hope to have this whole thing filled in the next 6 months. So.
There you go. Build out the capital. The
Yeah.
HQ for Bittensor.
HQ, this is the Bittensor hub, right? The macro guys, they'll call it Bittensor, but we'll I don't know if we call it text tensor. I don't know if that has the same ring to it, but we're trying to definitely build Austin into it's already very much like a hub for technology, but I think that everyone in Austin's it's kind of a young place right now, I went to San Francisco the other day, and I think the average age of San Francisco is like 40, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But the culture is like different, right? Because people, it's much more built around like what people in their 40s do rather than like what people in their 20s do. And so, there's so many young people here, and especially being right down the street from the University of Texas, there's always going to be young people coming through, which, is really great for growth. And I would say that like Manifold right now is in like growth stage. We want to grow. So really excited.
Oh yeah. I know y'all got some big plans for growth coming up too. But,
yes, sir.
Let's backtrack. When you first found Bittensor, how was that like? How do you know this was it? What made you committed to Bittensor?
So I was doom scrolling on GitHub, which is one of my favorite pastimes. I mean, I'll be on the 8th page of some random search term looking for projects. 99% of them are just empty repositories with readmes that say to be completed, right? And when I stumbled across, so when you see a lot of that, right, you kind of tune your mind to be able to like filter it out, right? And I was on the 8th page of AI crypto, and this is maybe 2020, right? And I found OpenTensor / Bittensor, and I thought, man, that's got kind of a nice ring to it. That's like a good name. That's instead of it being like, project number 0591, right? It's really got a nice name to it. So I clicked through, and I read the README, really like what I'm seeing. And I think, you know what? If these guys drop this project, I think I'm going to pick it up and continue working on it. This is the power of open source. And they kept on. So I started the project, and I started noticing in the feed, commit after commit after commit from Jake and all. And this is before they had launched Kusanagi. This was like in November of 2020. And so I just kept on checking in on the project. They added a Discord to the README. I joined the Discord. Jake and all is in there. We're kind of hanging out, and that's when I really fell in love with the project, because back then we didn't have compute like we have today. Nowadays, it's very easy to rent a GPU and do a training or a fine tuning. But back then, this was like V100 2080 Ti kind of days, right? Where the 2080 Ti is like the nicest graphics card you can like buy for your home. Now you can buy a 4090, which is like essentially an A100 with half the amount of VRAM. It's kind of incredible what you can have at home now. And so I really thought that with the mission that they were embarking on was really powerful, and I wanted to be a part of it. And so I just hung around, and really got to know them really well. And in November of 21, they asked me, hey, do you want to join? The foundation. I said, yeah. And worked with them for 3 years. And then one of the things when I kind of noticed when I was working on there, I was like, okay, how are we going to scale this past 2,000 UIDs? And this was something I was really passionate about at the time. I was like, we need to scale it, right? And that's when we came up with the ideas for subnets. And so when subnets got launched in last year, September, is when I kind of left OTF and was like, okay, I'm going to build my own subnet. And we registered Subnet 4, and we've learned a lot in a year. I'll tell you that. We've probably learned what you would learn in 10 years compressed down into 1. And so, it's been ups and downs, lefts and rights, but now we really kind of mastered what it takes to build an incentive mechanism, to make it robust to exploits, how to incentivize the correct things. And so we're really excited about this next year, especially going into dTAO, the ability to build out a really robust network, which we want to do with Targon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was Josh and I forget the Discord name already.
Sarkon.
Sarkon. What was y'all's first impression of Bittensor? Because y'all came in a little bit later than Rob here.
Yeah. So traditionally I came from not a crypto background at all. I'd never touched crypto before. I like the most I had done was some Ethereum mining for like a summer and made a couple $100 off of it, which was nice. But I was like joining way, way late in the game. And like I said, they found me on a random Discord server that wasn't crypto related, nothing. And it just happened to be the right place, the right time. And I was like, I like the team they have. Everybody seems like great people. And like, it just was the right time. So joined on. I was very skeptical at first. I'm a very hard sell on a lot of crypto stuff. But the thing I like about Bittensor is most crypto projects really lack that form of utility side, where there's like, here's why you would want this token. And I feel like Bittensor actually has a place where you can actually say, like, look, you would have this token so you can actually control these incentive mechanisms and these like subnets where you can actually get value and build products off of this ecosystem. And that can't be said for most cryptos. And so like the longer I was in it, the more I understood it. It really is something where it's like, okay, this is actually a project I can really actually see making sense and working.
Yeah.
There you go. Anything you guys
Yeah,
see differently?
I mean, to echo what Josh said, like I was never exposed to it. You know, in the early 2010s, my brother said we should Bitcoin mine, and I was like, no, that'll never work. And now I regret it. But you know, being exposed to these guys and their influence in the network and what they know have really turned my sights on it. And like now I look at it as such a positive force for technology as a whole. And I'm really excited to see what we can do and what every other subnet can push out in the next year or 2 years or 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of these things where I think a lot of people, especially after FTX and a lot of like, you still see it today. Like, you know, listen, I mean, I don't want to speak negative about other projects, right? I don't really pay attention to other projects. I really only pay attention to Bittensor. But like, you know, you see these things where it's like, oh yeah, my AI agent has a wallet and made a token. And yeah, okay. I mean, we work with AI every single day. We're on the inference side. We just got our cluster up. We're on the training side, right? We have a really deep grasp and understanding of like what these models are capable of. And, you know, I think that what gives crypto a bad name is like when I don't remember exactly what the token was. I saw it on Twitter though. I don't know if you know what I'm referring to, but
what you were showing me earlier, the Luna.
yeah, exactly. Well, but there was one before this, right, where it was like Mark Andreessen had like quote tweeted it or something like that. Yeah, I saw this and I was like, this is obviously a person, right? And they're like kind of like maybe an AI is like like writing the tweets, right? But like, you know, they're like trading their own token and like it's what people don't like about crypto, right? And Bittensor is like the inverse of that, right? Like Bittensor is about like it's very hardcore camp, like very much like, okay, how can we leverage nature itself, right? And nature is like all about food, you know, and energy. There was this really cool project that a research project in Tokyo from a research team in Tokyo, where they wanted to figure out what was the most efficient way that they could redesign the subway system, right? And so at each point where people would go in, like the subway entrance, right, they would put food and then they let mold grow. And the mold would find like a piece of food, which would be like a subway entrance, right?
Yeah.
And then it would redesign, it would restructure this entire organism would restructure so that it could efficiently allocate and move that food or that energy to the rest of the organisms, right? To where it was able to make the most efficient structure so that like an interconnection between these points, right? And that's using it's very simple, right? You have a little food, you got a little mold, And now you can leverage nature to find the most efficient structure, right? BitTensor works in the exact same way. Now, I think that when people traditionally come to it, right, like Josh is like, whenever I hire people, Jeff Bezos said this, and he's so right about this. Like, when you hire people, you need to have something that you admire about them, right? And that's like the half glass full. That's like the nice way of saying it. But what he means is like there's something you envy about them, or you wish that you had about you, right? And so Josh is like so good at he can go so in depth on a lot of these things that I'm not so good at, right? Like the thing, like the linter, the setup, like all of the stuff. I mean, it's really cool, and like that is the type of people that BitTensor can really attract, right? Whereas I think that like traditional crypto, like the truth terminal thing, is never going to attract Josh, right? Whereas BitTensor leverages the power of nature to grow these amazing, efficient structures that attract amazing talent like Josh and Ahmed, right? And that's what's so powerful about BitTensor, that I think that like is why BitTensor is going to be so huge, and why it's already huge. Like we would have never gotten to this point because we never did like a lot of these tokens will like pay exchanges to like get on them. There's like this whole kind of like incestuous relationship that happens there. We on BitTensor, they would say like, oh, you need to pay us all these tokens in order to get listed, and we were like, no, like you'll list us when you list us, right? And that organic approach to it, right, is why I think BitTensor is so large today, and why BitTensor is going to have a lot of staying power. Whereas these other crypto projects, that are in the intersection of AI crypto, who's that guy? He's on Twitter. He's like, I don't know his name, but I don't remember. I don't pay attention too much, but I saw him. He was talking about like this AI agent token's going to overtake BitTensor. It's like, this AI agent token's not going to be around in 6 months, because you know what I mean? Like it's so obvious what it is. Whereas with BitTensor, it's something very real. But because you're leveraging nature, it can be counterintuitive, and there can be perverse incentives. And so what we're doing is really kind of we're on this trajectory that like is really incredible. Coming from when it was just Jake, Alla, Francois, Eugene, Isabella, and myself, like it was just like 6 people and like a Discord, to where it is now, where I think OTF just passed like 150,000 followers on Twitter. That was 100% organic over years, and that is the power. That's what's so powerful about BitTensor. Sorry for getting on a high horse there.
No,
but
that's beautiful. That leads into what I wanted to talk about, was your relationship with Jake, a la some of those foundational members from back when you were at OTF, since you were one of those first 6 people.
No, I mean, I talk to Jake every day. I mean, I have like people I say GM to. This was something that like I was never really good at, is like making friends and networking, and like I wanted to make sure that like I say GM to the people that like I really want to stay in contact with, right? And so I text Jake every day. Anytime I have like a play like I want to run, I'll always run it by him, and say, what do you think about this, right? What's your thoughts? All it's the same way, and like I really try to stay in contact with them, just because it's almost like we've gone through this thing together. We've been on this journey together. I remember what it was like when it was just us, and like people would not give BitTensor the time of day. It's still kind of like that, but like now you go to a conference and you say, hey, do you know what BitTensor is? And everyone knows what BitTensor is. Whereas like we would come to consensus, and I remember the CEO of Foundry, right? They were having one of the like a party or something like that, like a get together at one of these conferences, and I went to him and I'm like pitching him BitTensor, and like he was so energetic about it, right? He loved the ideas, like, oh, this is gonna be great, right? And like now, like now that we kind of become so large, it's been really important to like, kind of circle the wagons and stay close to everyone. Make sure that like, we're all kind of keeping each check. Now, Jake and I have had our fair share of disagreements over the years, but it's because we care, that makes those disagreements so fierce, And so, but like at the end of the day, I know that like a lot of the big players in BitTensor, they operate in a way because they care, and that's like really powerful and really cool.
Yeah, no, that's great. And then from OTF, you started Manifold. That's where these guys come in.
Yeah, the muscle, like
The bodybuilders.
yes, I mean, yeah, that's another thing that they inspire me on. I mean, I got married and I gained like 25 pounds. It's like, you've ever heard of the freshman 15? There's like a getting married 25. I mean, I'm trying to get like these guys for real.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, what led you to start Manifold, and what was the starting vision there, and
Well,
then how does
yeah.
that lead into where you're at today with your team?
The thing that really I loved about BitTensor is I just wanted cheap inference. I was running this before ChatGPT and all of this, right? I was running this thing called Cowboy Computer. Hey, hey, well, how you doing? But it would write essays for you, and this is before ChatGPT and all that, right? So you would put in your essay prompt. It would go on Google, get a bunch of sources. It would write, like with GPT-2, like open source model, right? It would write the essay, and then it would, do MLA sourcing, and then it would do a plagiarism check just to make sure that it was all bona fide good, right?
Yeah.
I charge $100 per essay, right? Now, look back, maybe that wasn't the best idea of like what I should have been doing, but it was like the thing that interested me in AI was like, okay, wow, I could just type in my essay and then it can write the essay for me, like, and I don't have to do any work. I'm guaranteed an A. That's like amazing, right? And it can save me a lot of time. It can increase productivity. This is the thing that really, in not so many words, was really appealing to me. And so, I wanted to build a subnet that could do large inference and large language model inference, but also do the search queries and do all the different things that Cowboy was doing, right? And we've learned a lot of hard lessons, especially now that like it was really hard for me at first to give it up. But this is what's so important is like, you gotta empower people, you gotta give people like in that, like, so I handed the subnet off to Josh here, Josh and Ahmed, like, hey, I'm going to give you this baby, right? And they've just taken it and done incredible things with it, right? To where now, Targon's set to, do incredible things next year. And so that's really why, like, you start a company, right? You start a company because you want this thing and it's not currently available to you. And so we had tried to build it with text prompting and Subnet 1, but I really had this kind of vision for what I wanted to build, and it really didn't exist in the market at that time. And so that's why, we started Manifold, was to build Targon, right? And now it's kind of branched into like how, I've always been fascinated with robotics and all these other things, to where, these like, we don't have robots today washing our clothes. And like, I don't want to do dishes. I don't want to wash my clothes. I don't want to, do all of these like things that I consider menial tasks, right? I don't want to build a house. I don't want to build a car, right? And robots today don't exist. So why did we found Manifold? So that we can bring these things into existence, right? That is why you start a company. And so that's why we started Manifold.
There you go. Let's talk about what Manifold does today.
Yeah. Well, listen, I don't want to take too much. I mean, listen, Josh.
No.
I'll bounce past to Josh here.
Let's talk about what Manifold is in its current form. What is Targon? What do you guys do? What's the miner validator
Sure.
relation?
Sure. So I think a lot of Manifold right now, in its early stage at least, is like Targon. We have a lot of other projects we're working on, but Targon's kind of been our like jumpstart for everything else we want to do. So Targon at its heart is, like Rob said, inference. We want validators to be able to sell some sort of inference that anyone can come to and get for super cheap. And so the question was, okay, how do we build that? So the way we have it set up is you have your validators and you have your miners. The validators will generate a bunch of synthetic data. They'll send it to a bunch of miners, see how long it takes them to respond, and then the validators will then take all their responses, send them back to a little their own set of GPUs, and make sure that those answers are satisfactory. We have a bunch of different ways we check this. We'll investigate log probs, how many tokens were passed, the types of parameters we used, a whole bunch of different things. There's a lot that goes into it. And then for everything satisfactory, we give everybody their scores, and then as time goes on, we aggregate everybody's scores over a little sliding window, so it kind of takes time to ramp up your incentive, and then we'll post those to the chain, and then miners can slowly grow their score, and then once they get to a certain threshold, they'll be eligible for organic query. So this is something we're very excited about. We're releasing very soon. I think planned for this coming Monday, actually. We already have organics out, but now they'll actually be scored in the ecosystem. So if you get hit with someone sending a request, organic like me, you, any of us, like you wanted to go on Targon Hub and send a chat request or talk to something, you can send a request, and a real miner in the network will get that, and then we'll be able to post-mortem take that request and response and score it and make sure that what you got was correct. And if it was, we'll boost that miner up. And if it wasn't, we'll shoot them back down to earth. And so we're building
Zero mount.
Yes, and so
Send them to zero.
now we can incentivize not only serving good inference, but serving inference in real time to real people. And the like goal essentially is be able to tune down our synthetics so that we're only using synthetics to jumpstart new miners into the ecosystem, and everyone else is just scored purely off organics. And so we have this whole system built in where now we can kind of like fine tune that as we grow in organics. Like everything's in place to do that, and it's been a really fun ride.
Yeah, and in this system, miners run specific LLM models that you guys specify. The validators will then run those same models to verify that the miners most likely use that model.
Yes, so that was the biggest challenge. Was how do you make this is a remarkably challenging problem. Is how do you make sure that the outputs you get from a black box are the model outputs from a specific model that you want? And that's what we figured out how to do, was investigating the logistic probabilities of each token, how those move over time for different temperatures or different settings, all these sort of things. So yeah, the validators will run a certain set of models. And this is another cool thing we did was on Targon, each validator can specify what models they want to run. And it can be any number of models as long as it will fit on whatever system you're running on. So if validator is running on a 8100 box, they can run like 4 or 5 models. Like I think we're running a 70 billion, a 33 billion, a 13 billion, and like a 7 billion. So we have like 4 different models running. And the way the validators run them is very different from the way miners run them. So miners actually are running a OpenAI compliant endpoint. So that's why it's one of the ways our infrastructure works so well is because when a user sends a request, we don't touch the package of that request. Like whatever the user sends, that JSON is directly sent all the way through the miner, and the actual miner code that they run is nothing more than just a little Python script that checks the headers and makes sure they're okay. And from there it goes directly to a VLM instance. So the miner code is very lightweight, and we have some miners that are barely even using the base miner code. They're just doing it all on like a Nginx layer or a traffic layer where they just inspect the header and make sure everything checks out and then send it all the way to the VLM. But the validator side, they're not using the traditional VLM setup like that. It's a little custom verification script where we can say, hey, here's a response we got. Here's the request. Can you make sure this checks out? And it'll go through all these different test suites we set up. And then it'll respond with like, it failed. This is why it failed. It's a little like short, like too short or too long, or EOS fail. And then we'll have a long error. And then we take all that and we store it in a separate database where the miners can then go and see, oh, these are my last 100 requests. I can see this request here failed for this reason. Maybe I need to tune my parameters a little bit. And so it lets miners kind of in real time tune their setups and be able to test new things out and see how they're doing compared to other people. Like every miner can see every other miner's responses, requests, everything. So it's very, very transparent and easy to iterate for not only miners, but also us as we're working on stuff. Because we save all this data, if I want to test a new verification mechanism, I can spin that up on a test net, do whatever changes to the verification system I want, and then just pull those records down that I already have in the database and say, okay, this passed before, is it going to pass now? Like here's a whole bunch of bad requests that we got that before said they passed, but we know they shouldn't pass, and I can test it out retroactively, which makes it very efficient and nice to use.
Yeah, and from what I understand of your scoring system, you use the last 15,
Yes.
I guess, requests, basically, and that's what you base the scoring off of.
The last 15 requests per model and organics.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, and you said miners super lightweight in terms of what you guys have for them. Validators, on the other hand, you recommend 8
So
8100s?
that's the cool part. They can run however much or little as they want. And the trade-off for them is vTrust. So if you're not running, the 3, I think, of the largest validators are all running 8 pods, and they're all running the same models. And so if you're a smaller validator, you can just run a single model. And because we score on speed, if most of our miners, to stay competitive, have to run all the models. So if you're a smaller validator and you just run one model that we're also running, or even one that we're not running, all the miners will probably have the same type of speed. Like they've all figured out speed independently. So like if one miner is running a setup and they're only getting like 200 words per second, they're probably going to get 200 words per second, regardless of if I'm querying them with all my models versus some other validator on their model. And so you really only have to do like a single A100, and you can just spin up like a 7 billion, and that would be fine.
Yeah.
The miners themselves are also running these. I mean, we have some miners that are running multiple like 8 pods per model. They're running these super intense systems. The lightweight part is the miner code that we give them. So we say, hey, here's this Python script. It's like maybe 100, 150 lines of code, if that. And that's all they need to just verify that the request is correct. They stay in tune with the blockchain, make sure they're still registered, all that sort of stuff. But they can just use the raw VLM Docker image as their actual inference engine. And then that's the part that they really can mess around with and tweak and make sure is performing as fast as possible.
Yeah, no. What are the optimizations you guys are considering for verifying these models are ran?
Sure, we actually have a couple things planned that are going to be really exciting. The biggest thing I think that we have planned is to be able to have validators be able to kind of orchestrate what models they're running at a given time. So we already have this orchestration layer made where when the validator starts up, there's different ways it can determine what models it should run. And one of those is there's an endpoint we have on Targon Hub that'll say, hey, this is what Manifold's running. And so it's a little command line flag. You say, hey, I want to run models from endpoint. And the validator will start up, see what models it should run, and on its own, without any intervention, spin up these Docker images with all the different model verification endpoints. And so one of the obvious optimizations for us is we can schedule when a validator should verify outputs from a given model based on what images it has running at that time. So I could have 200 models for my validator, but then only run 5 at a time and slowly switch those out. And I'd always be sending requests from a whole bunch of different models, but then I would just schedule when I score them based on what models I have running at any given time. And that way, even if you have only like a single A100, you could just then keep recycling it. And as long as you can have a model that fit on a single A100, you can run any model you want. And then by that point, it would just be, if you want to run like a 70 billion, you just have to get a system large enough to hold a single 70 billion. And you can slowly just recycle models and recycle those GPUs and score responses from other models. So that's one of the biggest things we're looking at. Another cool thing we want to do is validator gossip. This could be inter-validator or across all validators, or I still gotta look into like how exactly that would look. The most obvious thing is inter-validator. So you could have multiple boxes or multiple like CPU nodes or GPU nodes. Let's say for whatever reason it's cheaper to run 4 independent A100s. You could have validators on each of those, and those 4 validator nodes would only be one validator key, and they would all share their data to each other and be able to query the miners independently. And then you could have 4 different boxes switching out these models. And those 2 things combined, I think, will really bring down costs a lot for validators. And at the same time, give us more opportunities to spin up more models and have these even larger models by opening up the like single box requirement that we have right now.
Yeah, and I mean, there is multiple inference subnets on Bittensor. You guys have achieved the highest tokens per second.
I think so, yeah.
You guys have a lot of accomplishments as what you've done with Targon. What are you guys most proud of that you've been able to do so far? I guess each of you.
Probably what I think that what really I'm excited about, right, is the amount of organic tokens that we have coming online, right? Like this is like out of all the things that like it's the real world usage that we're going to be seeing. Like this is super exciting. So we're going to be working with Dippy to power their language model, the language model that they train on Subnet 11, right? Subnet 11 is a training subnet. The model that is produced on Subnet 11, we're going to be able to run on Subnet 4 and then power their app with that, right? Which is really cool. This is something that like, it really validates like the Bittensor thesis, you know, which is something that I'm really excited about. And, you know, our goal for this quarter is to get to 8 billion tokens a day in organics. And so we're onboarding and we're working with other people in the BitTensor community right now to get those. So I actually think that we might beat expectations on this, where we could actually maybe do 12 to 14 billion tokens in or organic tokens a day. And this would actually correspond to enough revenue for Manifold to where we don't have to sell a single towel, and it's all everything that you see right here can be paid with that, right? Which is for me, that's exciting, And so as a because it shows growth, right? But what would you say is yours? Or
No, go on.
yeah, go on.
I think honestly the biggest thing I'm proud of from this past quarter or past 2 quarters has been the level of transparency that we have brought to the subnet. With stats and hub, miners, like Josh said, can see every record they have sent that comes through us. They can see every request, they can see the log props, they can see the response tokens, everything like that. And that level of transparency goes a long way to not only pushing us to our next goal of organics, but also just shows like our standing in the community. We're open, we're honest, and we're ready to build, and we're going to keep building.
Amen, brother.
Another thing of Ahmed's that's really become apparent, especially this last quarter, this like most recent quarter, even the past few weeks, has been having this open dashboard where everyone can see everyone else's requests makes catching cheaters super easy.
Yeah.
You don't even have to do anything because all these miners are so incentivized to catch each other. The second someone figures out an exploit, we have miners that are like, hey, someone's doing this. This is what they're doing, and I think this is how you could fix it. And we have multiple miners that are opening up pull requests into Targon and helping us out even.
I think they were messaging us at like midnight over the weekend.
They self-police now.
Exactly.
They self-police because it's in their best interest. If someone else figured out an exploit, they either do the exploit figure out the exploit themselves, but then it's like the cost difference between figuring out the exploit themselves versus telling us and having us fix it, and so that brings that bad actor down, is much more profitable for them than for them to fix that or implement that exploit themselves and then have me ruin it the next day and patch it myself.
Yeah.
So that's been a really big help, and that has pushed our subnet to be so much more stable and the verification mechanism so much better. Even in the last few weeks, we had this 1 week where some exploiters were really going crazy, and it was just patch after patch after patch. And now we haven't had any exploits in over a week, and it's been very, very smooth sailing. It's been beautiful.
And if I can touch on that a little bit, right? Yeah. This is actually what's I think so powerful about BitTensor is that when the incentives are aligned correctly, you can get these incredible outcomes, right? And when the incentives aren't aligned correctly, you get perverse outcomes, And so, especially going to something like dTAO, where the miners themselves will be accruing the subnet token, right? This is what's going to enable, like they're going to become owners. They're going to become like us, right? And so they're going to be incentivized as well to make sure that the subnet is doing well. And so you can build these sorts of communities around subnets that where people come into a subnet, they start out as miners, but then they become, like validators, right? And then they become a validator and then, so on and so forth. They kind of grow up the stack inside of the subnet. And we're already starting to see that on Subnet 4, right? Where I think that our mining community is one of the best in BitTensor. And, we have total rock stars. Like, I just want to do a quick shout out for John Durbin. I mean, this guy is the best.
Awesome.
We love John. That guy's
Shout
great.
out,
Shout out
Shout out to,
Complex.
Complex.
But I knew about John I've known about him for a long time. He made Ouroboros, right, which is a training framework, and he's done a lot of great work with LoRa's and things like that, like pre-BitTensor. And so that shows that like BitTensor is able to attract a level of talent that I don't think that Ethereum is attracting. I don't think that these other very large chains, Solana, right, are not attracting the John Durbins of the world, right? You know who attracts the John Durbins of the world? Google, Facebook, or I guess Google Brain, DeepMind, FAIR, the Facebook AI research, that's who attracts John Durbin, right? And instead, John Durbin's like, I'm going to work on open source language models. I'm going to work on open source AI with BitTensor, right? Which shows how powerful, again, BitTensor is, right? This is the place to be, right? I mean, if you're not in BitTensor, what are you doing? I mean, for real.
That's right. I mean, y'all got a lot going on. Y'all got a lot of great talent on Subnet 4. And what are the goals? Short term, long term? What's the vision here?
Short term, I mean, it's short term and long term is growth, right? For the subnet, right, we want to not only are we vying for the first place spot right now, but we are also really, really looking to expand the number of models that we are hosting. Right now, we're hosting a few models that we've sort of we've defined, right? But we're going to be opening it up to where anyone can just fine tune a model on Subnet 37, right? And then deploy that model on Subnet 4. We could pre-train a model on Subnet 9 and deploy that on Subnet 4, to where we can have hundreds of models on Subnet running on Subnet 4, and not just text models, not just LLMs, but text to image, text to video, text to audio, right? Encompassing all of the different inference tasks that are available that are out there in the market right now. And by this time next year, I want to be the largest. I want Subnet 4 to be the largest inference provider in the world, not just like bigger than Together, bigger than insert other types of people like that, right? But doing the largest amount of organic tokens, potentially even larger than OpenAI, right? This is like where we really want to go, and I think that we can grow there. And this is what, using the power of BitTensor, I think that we can really get there. So this is what we're looking really forward to on the subnet, in the short term, and then like getting that online in the next month, by the end of this quarter, where we'll have people who can deploy the models and then also inference them, but also the long term, where we have all the different types of inference tasks, and the number of organic tokens that we're doing is exceeding several trillion a day.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing those type of numbers with tokens, that could equate to billions in revenue.
Billions with a B,
That's
capital
right.
B, not a little b, a big B. Okay,
Yeah.
and that's just one subnet on BitTensor. I mean, just one subnet. This is what is so cool about what we've been building, right? And we're so early on. I mean, it's the things that BitTensor is going to be able to pull off is really incredible, and it all happened organically, right? We didn't have VCs coming in and like, oh, we're going to exploit you and we're going to do all this and that and the other, right? It was 100% organic, right? It was by the people, for the people. Democracy. Now, down with the aristocracy,
That's right.
for the people. This is what is really, really exciting about the long term of BitTensor. Is I really think that the path that we're traveling on right now, I would say this last year we've really been figuring out how to build incentive mechanisms, and we have a really good idea on how to do them now, where we have objective metrics and we just maximize them, always up technology. So really excited about it. Now for Manifold as a whole, right? We also want to grow in a lot of different directions, right? We obviously open source AI is going to be our primary target or primary focus for at least the next 6 months, the next few quarters, right? But we also are very interested in training our own models, conducting our own research, right? Making our own discoveries, pushing the whole field forward, right? And making sure that is open source and in the hands of the people, right? Not locking it up behind closed doors, right? And then extending that research into the real world, to the world of atoms, like with robotics, So this is, for the long term, that's kind of our goal, right? Robotics is something that takes a while, but, it's not like software where you can just iterate, right? Every time you iterate, it costs like several $1,000s. So it's like, you want to be careful,
Yeah.
But it's along the growth trajectory, right? Where we just continue to grow and grow and grow. This is really how I foresee Manifold going. And then, we're just contributing back and pouring that into BitTensor and to open source AI.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have quite lofty goals with billions in potential revenue to be made. More short term, Subnet 11, Dippy, they've said they're going to start using Subnet 4, working with Manifold to help power their app, which was number 3 in Germany recently. And I assume you guys have other partnerships in the works with other subnets. How do you guys plan to integrate those products technically versus how do you decide what directions you're going to do, what subnets have potential, where you want to work, who you want to work with? How do you decide all those things?
The way I decide is I say, do you need inference? If the answer is yes, then we will provide it to you. Like it's really that simple. Like we want to be agnostic. We want it to be open. We want it to be to where anyone can use it, right? Now, obviously on our side, right, we need to have the business development and we need to be going out there like kind of, going and seeking out those partnerships, right? But once we've achieved that that flywheel, right, and when it starts spinning on its own, right? Think of it like the car starter, we need the engine to turn over first, and that's why we're going out and really trying to get those partnerships, right? But once it's turned over, it's just going to start spinning on its own, and that's really what the approach that we're taking, Now, technically speaking, I think maybe Josh should take over on that, but from the business development and the partnership side, right? Like working with Dippy, working with world-class teams and really understanding what their pains are and then integrating that into the software stack of the subnet is really like what, how I think that we get that done.
Yeah. So technical implementation. What's
Sure.
the
Uh,
breakdown?
So one of the first things I remember doing when I first started working on Targon was one of the very first things I wanted to work on was how do I make this standardized? How do we planning for organics, like planning out for the future, even way back then? How can we make this where it is as easy as possible to bring people on and bring organics on like this? And the most obvious way was how can I make this ChatGPT compliant? How can I make this OpenAI compliant? And we achieved that. And so now all these other people that are currently using any sort of inference are pretty much all going to be using some sort of OpenAI compliant endpoint. And that's what we've built. We have Targon Hub where it is fully OpenAI compliant. You can send a request. If you can send it to OpenAI, if you can send it to ChatGPT, you can send it to us. And so for Dippy, for any of these people, they're probably already, I think Subnet 11 is using OpenAI right now. It's a change in the endpoint.
Subnet 11 trains.
Oh, sorry, which one? There's someone that
Kaito.
So like even Dippy, if they're using like OpenAI or whatnot, they're probably using some sort of endpoint and they just change the URL. We give them some tokens or they buy some tokens from us and
Boom.
it's already done. It's
Yeah.
already done, ready to go.
Yeah, and yeah, we've been talking with Kaito about integrating their embedding model, right? That really gets into being able to run all of these different types of modalities as well, which is no easy task, right? But making sure that the scheduling and these efficiencies that Josh is working on, right? We can really open it up to where it's like we're basically the Walmart for AI. That's kind of what we want to do with Targon.
The Walmart for AI for
Yeah.
the people.
For the people. I mean, listen, I don't like elitism. I don't like aristocracy. I like things becoming cheaper. Let's make things cheaper. Like, and not to make it political, right? But
The election coming up.
with the election
Halloween.
coming up, I mean, we're really staring here in America, right? There's two kind of paths that we can go down, right? We can do deflation, where the dollar becomes stronger, right? And people hold on to their dollars and things like that. Now that gets us out of our, that's probably better for the majority of people, right? Because things become cheaper, right? They don't become more expensive. But if you own things like assets, right, that's not good for asset holders, right? And so if something's not good for asset holders, then if asset prices deflate, right, then if people took out debt on those assets, that debt becomes more expensive, right? And whereas if it inflates away, the debt becomes cheap to where if it inflates so much that the debt is worthless, right? So which one do you think the aristocracy and the American elite's going to pick, right? They're going to pick hyperinflation. And this is what we're kind of already in the midst of seeing right now, right? Where we just had a huge amount of inflation in the United States economy. And how can okay, so the boomers are doing this to us, right? Like it's just what they're going to do. They're going to inflate their debt, right? And they're going to borrow against it, and their assets and their houses and all the things that they own are become more valuable, right? And then who does that hurt? Us, the people sitting here right now, where the average age of the people sitting here is probably like 25, right? I mean, that's just they're not going to care because they're going to be dead. I mean, I've heard this before, right? And so how can we could sit here and, cross our arms, throw a tantrum, right? Or we can innovate, right? And how can we innovate? How can we get ourselves out of this problem? By using technology to make things cheaper. And so we want to drive inference costs to zero, to where everyone can have access to AI. We want to drive everything to zero. And that's why we have the robots, right? I mean, now the robots is a longer process, but it's in this goal of making things cheaper for everyone. This is good for the people. We want people. I want to be able to own a house. I want to be able to have a family, and I don't want it to cost $10 million. You know, if it were up to the boomers, if it were up to the aristocracy, if it were up to the elite, they would have that, right? They would want, that's what they want. And we got to fight against that. And that's why what we are working here at Manifold. Amen. Can I get an amen? Amen.
I'll give that an
Yeah.
amen.
Yeah. Let's go. You know?
Rob's clearly passionate about Bittensor.
Yeah. I mean, but I'm serious. That's like a serious concern I have, right? You know, and we're not even talking about our kids. Like, you know, it's not really a thought for us probably right now, but like, you know, it's what I'm saying is that like, what if we, you know, our kids, it's going to be worse if he continues on his path. And the way that we can solve it is through innovation, through technology, because technology is inherently deflationary. So, you know, we got to get out there and we got to get it done, you know, because if we don't get it done, then it's over, you know, it's over. I mean, so we have to do it. Like, you know, we don't have a choice. We must go out there and innovate. We must go out there and build this technology. That's why we, you know, are investing into offices like this, so we can bring together like-minded people so that we can build this technology and bring it to the masses, right? Who cares about your AI agents token, man? Who cares about it, right? You know, I mean, you're playing a game of musical chairs, and it's kind of dumb. Like, we should be solving hard, technically challenging problems. And how can we solve it? Through incentive mechanisms.
Absolutely. That's pushing the pace of innovation.
Pushing
That's
the
what
pace of
you
innovation.
guys are doing here at Manifold.
Exactly.
You're always trying to push the limits. And that's what the purpose of dTAO is for, to help increase that pace of innovation. So what are your guys' thoughts each on dTAO? How do you think that impacts you guys? Impacts operations, dTAO in general? Thoughts?
I don't have too many thoughts on it. I kind of just focus on Targon itself. I focus on the infrastructure itself. That's what I care about.
That's beautiful.
The tokenomics behind it, I'm just going to focus on the actual code.
Leave that to Rob.
Leave that to Rob.
Yeah, leave it to Rob. Yeah.
Exactly. I do the ecosystem. Rob's the visionary. That's his job.
You know, I've given dTAO a lot of thought, actually. And, you know, and also I try to shield these guys, you know, because, listen, we got to, like I just said, it's really important that we solve the technology, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know,
You got them working on the tech 24/7.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
24/7 is right.
Yeah, I mean, you know, exactly. But I, you know, I'll say on dTAO, right? I was like kind of freaked out about it for a long time. You know, I was like not so much of a fan of it. And then Jake came down and saw me and Austin, and we kind of spent like 2 days just like sitting in front of the TV, like doing simulations and things like that. And I really kind of understood like the purpose of dTAO and actually how powerful it could be, right? Because on the surface, right, it's like, okay, well, I don't want to have like my own token and like all this crazy stuff. Like, I don't want that, right? I just want to build cool technology and drive prices to zero so that we can beat the boomers, you know? Like, that's what I want, you know? And I understood that what was happening was like there was a lot of, you know, when you have perverse incentives, you need to be able to have ways of aligning that better. And by forcing subnet owners to, and subnet owners are now miners, validators, and us, like the people who build the subnet, right? Like now everyone's now an owner, right? And so we really need to make it to where the economy of the subnet is such that where it can take, where there's growth. And that's what dTAO empowers, right? Where you have a really great economy. We think that Subnet 4 is going to have an excellent economy, right? Because, hey, if you're using Targon, if you pay us in TAO and you put it into the TAO side of the pool, we'll give you a 15% discount on your inference costs, right? So now more TAO's going into the pool, which leads to more emission. If there's more emission, that means that we can serve more models, which means, and we can also attract more miners, which means that, you see what I mean? It's a powerful flywheel, right? Whereas if you're purely trying to extract from the network, right, and you're pulling TAO out of the pool, your emission goes down, which means less TAO is going to the pool. You're selling more, which means, you see what I mean? And now it's a vicious cycle down, right? And so it really puts the subnet owners and the people participating in this sort of subnet economy, pushes them in the right direction, which is what we want. And so now I'm kind of dTAO pilled, you know? So, I mean, that's kind of how I think. Now, long term, I think that this is actually going to, like, I know we're not supposed to talk about price action, you know, but I think that it's bullish for the price action. Like, if you hold the token, if you hold TAO, right, it's good for TAO holders, because now, like, people who, like, you can't extract from Bittensor at all anymore, basically, without, like, really paying attention to the economy or crashing the economy. And then if you crash your economy, then, you know, no one's ever going to want to participate in your community anymore. And so you have to really be focused on building a great community. You have to be really focused on having a great economy. You have to be focused on actually doing really important work, like sticking it to the boomers. So, you know, this is like, you know, I think that we're set up to do really well in dTAO as a result of that. And so I'm looking forward to it. I think that there are other people, you know, even after, because I've talked to other people about this too, where it's like, you know, because like basically it's like a Uniswap V1 pool, and I get it, and there's slippage and all these things, and I think that there are ways that we can make dTAO better, of course, you know, like, and I totally understand those critiques, right? But I think the critiques where it's like Bittensor is a Y Combinator or Bittensor is a startup accelerator, I don't think that's true. And I think that if you view Bittensor in that way, yeah, you're not going to like dTAO. You know, if you view Bittensor as a protocol that enables the creation of these sort of super commodities, right? It doesn't just have to be intelligence; it can be anything. Like, this is something I've been thinking about with the robots, right? Like, I wish I could make a Bittensor subnet for the robots where we can make them fight. Like and there was a competition to make robots fight. And then whoever built the best robot that could fight the best, because then you're going to have all these athletic characteristics, right? And you define it in a certain way. Now you're going to be able to get like huge innovations in robotics in like 2 months, because now people are always thinking about how can I build a better athletic robot, right? And then, you know, there's all this incentive to do so. So, you know, while it has to be software, well, Bittensor's software constrained right now, you know, you could use it pretty much for anything. Like Subnet 51, you know, for using it for compute, or you know. So this is, I think that dTAO on the whole is a TAO holder. It's very good for TAO holders. I think it's good for subnet owners and subnet builders. Probably the better word to use there. It's better for subnet builders who want to actually build commodities and drive prices to zero. I don't think it's good for extractors. I don't think it's good for exploiters.
But it's good for innovation.
It's great for innovation. You know, it puts the fire to the feet of a lot of these people. Like, you know, there are a lot of people in, I would say, in Bittensor right now who, you know, like I feel like there's a lot of people who are in Bittensor right now who are partying on islands, you know, and having a great time. And listen, man, I love a good party, you know. I love a good party, but we're never going to solve these problems that are like literally existential to the world, you know, if we're partying all the time, you know. And now we don't party, right? What I'm saying is that and I'm not going to call out people here, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not going to name names because it's not like I think these people are bad people, right? It's just that, you know, you need to be working all the time in order to solve these really hard problems. And so, you know, like, we don't really take vacations here, and if we do take vacations, we make it about work. You know what I mean? Like we're going on a vacation to NERPS, you know? And what are we going to be doing at NERPS? Listening to talks, learning about the latest and greatest in technology, right? You know, we're not buying expensive things, you know, like, so I won't harp on that too much, but basically in dTAO, if that's kind of the scheme that you have set up right now, and you're using Bittensor in that way, and you're kind of flying under the radar, it's not going to work anymore. And that's what's good about dTAO.
There you go. I mean, you guys are builders. You have one of the best subnets, if not the best subnet.
Amen. We work our ass off for that. Yeah.
Bittensor is known for commoditizing intelligence.
Yes.
Is what some people say. You guys create the rules that the intelligence is created within. how do you feel that that intelligence that is created under your rule system could potentially reach some singularity type moment to where the evolution now is irreversible and self-propelling into the future?
Yeah, I think that especially along with the dTAO kind of thread, right? Like, what I think is cool about dTAO is like, let's say that we were more hobbyists, right? Like, obviously, Manifold, we're very serious. We try to be professional. I know we're in Halloween costumes right now, but we're just big fans of Halloween. Listen, sometimes you gotta breathe in the fresh air and appreciate life, and appreciate
Sometimes you got party.
You gotta party, but like the way we party is we play Super Smash Bros. And we wear Halloween costumes on Halloween. That's a good way to party.
Might have a beer next to the laptop.
Yeah, have a beer or two. You know what I mean?
Like
But
social network.
yeah, like the
Networking.
exactly. Listen, but along that thread of detail, right? I could see like if we were just like individuals, if we were just individuals, what would be cool is that with BitTensor, in the same way that I found BitTensor, and I thought, man, this is going to be really cool, and this is going to be huge, and we're going to be able to solve so many hard problems with this, right? Like, along that same vein, I imagine that there's a kid out there today who's maybe he's in high school, maybe she's in high school. I'm not going to limit it. Maybe they're out there right now and they're thinking about these cool things that they want to build, and then they find Subnet 4 one day, and when they find Subnet 4, they say, man, I'm going to mine this thing because I think it's so cool, and then they join the community, and once they join the community, now they're writing code and doing PRs. And now all of a sudden you have 50 people all around the world who are just like this person, who are all contributing to this open source project, right? To where now it's like we don't even kind of need to develop anymore. Obviously, we're still there, right? But now it's this big thing. It's much bigger than us. And that's what's so cool about it. I mean, I'm getting chills just thinking about it right now. There's like what we have, this powerful thing that we have with John Durbin and Complex, and these amazingly, incredibly smart people that I have so much in my admiration and respect for. Those people could be, in a year from now, could be large builders and have, hundreds of PRs merged on Targon. So, this is how I see it kind of playing out, where the number of people that are participating in BitTensor is going to 10x next year. And then it's going to 10x the year after that, and to where we have so many really smart people building on BitTensor that we're able to just drive like someone like we were in New York, Jake, the Macrocosmos guys, Arash, like we had a bunch of people in New York, right? And Jake asked the room, he says, he asked the room, he says, who here would have hired Rob? And the whole room silent. No one says anything, right? And Jake goes, that is what makes BitTensor powerful, right? Is that it brings in people like Rob. And that, it was nice. It was very touching to me, right? But what he means by that is that, like, those people who maybe are overlooked, or maybe, aren't going this traditional path where they're, stats maxing or resume maxing, but they're just really interested and passionate about solving these super hard problems that threaten the literal existence of our lives. And BitTensor attracts those people to do amazing things. And so inside of something like dTAO, I mean, it's true today in BitTensor, but I think dTAO kind of amplifies it, right? To where now, all of these people from all different walks of life who maybe aren't, going to Harvard or MIT, and stats maxing, right? And like really trying to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to get my PhD and then I'm going to get paid $300,000, blah, 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 right? Like, while I can respect that path, there's something much more noble about this path, right? And I think that's what's really powerful about BitTensor. And I know I keep saying that phrase, but it's like, it's so true. I think this is how it kind of evolves. I think BitTensor's I think BitTensor will flip Bitcoin. I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, but I think that because of this exact thing right here that we're talking about is why BitTensor will be bigger than Bitcoin. Don't shoot me, internet. Don't hang me for that. But that's just, I'm allowed to have an opinion. Maybe not for long, but we'll see how this election goes. But
Bittensor can possibly change the world. It gives people a different route, and you guys have taken that different route, and you've maximized that different route, and you've created something truly remarkable and can potentially change the world, compete with OpenAI, replace their business model. And it's impressive what you guys have done here. And I know Josh has a workout he's got to get to soon.
Yes, sir.
this guy's stat maxing on the bench too.
Absolutely. We'll wrap it up with this, since you guys are builders at heart. What advice would you guys have to people building in Bittensor or want to build in Bittensor?
You take that first. Let me think on that for a second.
Okay, I'll let you think on it. If you want to get started in Bittensor, the first thing I would do is I would start mining, right? Because Bittensor is not Turing complete, and I think that this kind of trips people up, right? It's leveraging organics, it's leveraging nature, right? And so you need to be thinking about like what makes a tree grow, right? That's like maybe the better way of thinking about it, like start mining, right? Start talking and start communicating, making friends, getting to know people, joining the community, right? Really get a deep fundamental grasp on, on how Bittensor works. I want to use an example here. Alex Drox, do you know him?
No, I'm not familiar.
He does Miners Union.
Oh, okay. Yes, I do know him.
Yes, he is like the perfect example of like how you should get involved in Bittensor. If you want to eventually build your own subnet, right? He went the validator path, but like there's kind of a couple different like classes, like like World of Warcraft, like classes you can pick. Like you could be like the warlock, which is like the validator. You could be a shaman, which is like a subnet owner, or subnet builder. But like kind of follow the path he did, which is like he started out mining. He made a community of other miners, right? Miners Union, right? And then they said, you know what, man, these validators are they were unhappy with the validators for a host of reasons, right? And so they said, we're going to start our own thing, right? And they built a community. So if you want to get started in Bittensor, join the community, start mining. That's the easiest and best place to start. If you don't know how to get started, go to Miners Union. And because I guarantee you there's someone else in there who doesn't really know how to mine either, but wants to do it, right? And then build your own community. And then next thing you know, you're going to have like a huge organization inside of Bittensor because it's organic. Don't try to force things. Just have a good idea, something that you want that isn't there today, right? And really just try to drive that and maximize that. So that's how you do it,
It's beautiful. Anything you guys would like to add to new people or builders in the space, advice-wise? Since you do work on Subnet 8.
Yeah, I would say
Subnet 4.
Yeah.
I would say from a more of like if you're trying to go the route of a subnet builder and you want to like build your own thing, I think really focusing and trying to learn as much as you can about how the ecosystem works with all the fancy words stripped away. In Bittensor, we have like these neurons and synapses and dendrites and yada. And when I first came in, that was the biggest thing I struggled with, and really digging into the weeds and digging through the source code and figuring out, okay, what is really all this stuff doing? What is actually happening here? And once you have that good mental image built in your head, it's really not that complicated. And once you have that good mental model, try and even just build something not even on Bittensor. Like try and just build that sort of framework where you have an entity that validates and entities that do work. And you can build some sort of proof of concept without the whole blockchain side of it. And once you have that going and you can validate, okay, I made this ecosystem where I have multiple things verifying and multiple things mining, and like you can do that on your own computer, like with something you can make like a random number generator or something and score random numbers. Like it's not that hard to think of an example of something you could build like that. Build something like that and verify like, okay, this works. I understand this, and then start working on an actual subnet idea and start being in these communities, talking with other people and saying, hey, would anybody be interested in this? Would anybody want to help build this? And I think that would be a really good way to get started.
Absolutely. Anything?
No, I have nothing to add with these experts. I think they did them all.
Absolutely. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure. Great
Likewise.
talking with you.
Thank you.
Always-
Thank you. God bless
always-
you, sir.
Thanks, man.
Always good